The book club. In a small town, there was a library called the Little Book House. It was a quiet place where people went to read books, study, or just sit and think. One day, a young girl named Emma visited the library. Emma loved to read, but she didn't have many friends who shared her love for books. She felt a little lonely. While walking through the library, Emma met Mrs. Brown, the librarian. Mrs. Brown was kind and always had a warm smile. She knew almost every book in the library. Emma often talked to her about the books she read. One day, Emma said to Mrs. Brown, "I wish I had friends who loved reading like I do." Mrs. Brown thought for a moment and then had an idea. "Why don't we start a book club?" she suggested. "A place where people can come together, read books, and talk about them." Emma's eyes lit up. "That sounds wonderful," she said excitedly. Mrs. Brown quickly put up a sign on the library door that said, "Join the Little Book House Book Club." She also wrote down the first meeting date, Saturday at 2 p.m. Emma helped Mrs. Brown by telling everyone at school about the book club. Some students looked interested, but others thought it was boring. "Who wants to sit and read?" they laughed. Emma didn't mind. She hoped that at least a few people would join. On Saturday, Emma arrived at the library early. She was nervous. What if no one came? What if it was only her and Mrs. Brown? She sat in the reading room, looking at the door, waiting. Mrs. Brown brought some cookies and juice, hoping to make the meeting a bit more fun. Soon the door opened and Emma's friend, Jack, walked in. "Hi, Emma," he said, looking a little shy. "I thought I would give this book club a try." Emma was so happy to see him. "I'm glad you came, Jack," she said with a big smile. Next, two girls from Emma's class, Lucy and Sarah, walked in together. "We heard about the book club," said Lucy. "We love to read, too." Sarah added, "And we brought our favorite books to share." As the clock struck 2 p.m., more people came into the room. There was Mr. Green, a teacher from school, and even some parents and younger kids. In total, there were about 15 people in the room. Emma couldn't believe it. She looked at Mrs. Brown, who smiled back at her. "This is just the beginning," Mrs. Brown whispered. Mrs. Brown started the meeting by welcoming everyone. "Welcome to the Little Book House Book Club," she said. "Here, we will read books, talk about them, and share our thoughts." She explained that each meeting, they would choose a book to read together. At the next meeting, they would discuss what they liked or didn't like about the book. For their first book, Mrs. Brown chose a simple story called The Adventures of Tom. It was a fun story about a boy who went on exciting adventures in the forest near his home. "This is a great book to start with," Mrs. Brown said. "It's easy to read and has many exciting parts." Everyone agreed, and they decided to read the first 3 chapters by the next meeting. Then, Mrs. Brown asked if anyone wanted to share why they joined the book club. Jack spoke first. "I joined because I want to read more," he said. "I usually only read for school, but I think it will be fun to read different books." Lucy and Sarah agreed. They said they often read at home, but didn't have many friends to talk about books with. Mr. Green added, "Reading is important, and it's great to see young people interested in books." After talking about the book and why they joined the club, Mrs. Brown asked if anyone had a favorite book they wanted to share. Emma brought her favorite book, The Little Garden, a story about a girl who grows a beautiful garden in her backyard. She talked about why she loved the story and how it made her feel happy. Others shared their favorite books too. Some liked adventure stories, while others enjoyed books about animals or magic. The meeting ended with everyone feeling excited. They all took a copy of The Adventures of Tom to read at home. Emma felt happy and proud. She finally had a group of friends who loved reading as much as she did. As everyone left the library, Mrs. Brown turned to Emma and said, "See? There are many people who love books just like you." Emma nodded. "I can't wait for the next meeting," she said with a big smile. That night, Emma started reading the first chapter of The Adventures of Tom. She couldn't put it down. The story was so interesting. She wondered what her friends would think about it. She looked forward to the next book club meeting, where they would all sit together, talk, and share their thoughts. As the days went by, Emma noticed that more people were interested in the book club. Even some of the students, who laughed at her in the beginning, started asking about the book they were reading. Emma realized that the book club was not just about reading. It was about bringing people together and sharing ideas. And so, the Little Book House Book Club began its journey. Emma and her friends had many books to read and adventures to share. But this was just the start of their story. The week passed slowly for Emma. Every day after school, she went to her room and read The Adventures of Tom. The story was full of surprises. Tom was a brave boy who explored the forest, met strange animals, and found hidden treasures. Emma couldn't wait to talk about it with the book club. She wondered if Jack, Lucy, Sarah, and the others were as excited as she was. Finally, Saturday arrived. Emma woke up early, feeling eager. She got ready and picked up her copy of The Adventures of Tom. She went to the library an hour before the meeting to help Mrs. Brown prepare. When she arrived, Mrs. Brown was setting up chairs in a circle. "Good morning, Emma," Mrs. Brown greeted her. "I have a feeling today is going to be an interesting meeting." Emma helped by arranging snacks on the table: cookies, fruits, and juice. Slowly, the other book club members started arriving. Jack came in with a big grin. "I can't wait to talk about the book," he said. Lucy and Sarah followed, holding their copies of the book. "We have so much to say," Lucy said excitedly. "Tom is such an amazing character," added Sarah. As everyone settled into their seats, Mrs. Brown began the meeting. "Welcome back, everyone," she said warmly. I hope you enjoyed the first 3 chapters of The Adventures of Tom. Today, let's share what we thought about the story. Jack raised his hand first. I liked the part where Tom found the secret cave in the forest, he said. It was so exciting. I could almost see the cave in my mind. It was dark and a little scary, but Tom was very brave. Mrs. Brown nodded and smiled. Yes, that part was very exciting, she agreed. What do you think, Emma? Emma thought for a moment. I liked the part where Tom made friends with the fox, she said. At first, Tom was scared of the fox, but then he realized that the fox was just as scared as he was. They became friends and helped each other. I think it shows that sometimes things we are afraid of can turn out to be friends. The room was quiet for a moment as everyone thought about what Emma said. Then Mr. Green, the teacher, spoke up. That's a very good point, Emma. He said, books can teach us a lot about friendship and courage. Does anyone else have a part they liked? Lucy and Sarah both raised their hands. Lucy spoke first. I liked how Tom always helped the animals in the forest, she said. Even though he was on an adventure, he always stopped to help those in need. It made me think about how we should help others, even when we are busy. Sarah nodded. Yes, and I liked the part where Tom shared his food with the hungry birds, she added. Yes, and I liked the part where Tom shared his food with the hungry birds, she added. He didn't have much, but he still shared. It made me think about kindness. The discussion went on for a long time. Everyone had different parts they liked and different ideas about the story. Some thought Tom was very brave, while others thought he was kind and caring. They talked about what they would do if they were in Tom's place. Would they be as brave? Would they help the animals? Mrs. Brown listened carefully to everyone's thoughts. She was happy to see the members of the book club thinking deeply about the story. Books help us see the world in new ways, she said. They teach us lessons, help us understand others, and make us think about what we would do in different situations. After the discussion, Mrs. Brown had a fun activity planned. I thought it would be nice if we wrote our own adventure stories, she announced. You don't have to write a long story, just a short adventure like Tom's. Think about what kind of adventure you would like to have and write about it. Everyone was excited about this idea. They took out paper and pens and began writing. Jack wrote about exploring a mountain, Lucy wrote about a magical garden, and Sarah wrote about a secret island. Emma thought for a moment and then decided to write about an adventure in the library. In her story, the library came to life at night. The books flew off the shelves, and the characters inside the books started talking to each other. Emma, the main character, went on a journey with them through the different stories. For the next half hour, the room was filled with the sound of pens moving across paper. Mrs. Brown walked around, smiling as she peeked at what they were writing. When everyone finished, they took turns sharing their stories. There were stories about flying to the moon, finding hidden treasure, and meeting magical creatures. Each story was different, showing the imagination and creativity of each member. Emma was the last to share. She read her story about the library coming to life. Everyone listened carefully, their eyes wide with wonder. When she finished, they clapped. "That was amazing," said Jack. "I wish our library would come to life like that." Mrs. Brown smiled warmly. "You all did a wonderful job," she said. "Your stories are full of creativity and imagination." As the meeting came to an end, Mrs. Brown handed out the next reading assignment. "For the next meeting, let's read chapters for 2-6 of the Adventures of Tom," she said. "We will continue our discussion and maybe even have another fun activity." The members took their books and headed home, already excited for the next meeting. As Emma walked out of the library, she felt happy and content. The book club was more than she had hoped for. It was not just a place to read books. It was a place to make friends, share ideas, and learn new things. Over the next few weeks, the book club continued to meet every Saturday. They read about magical lands, brave heroes, and funny animals. Each book brought new discussions and new ideas. More people joined the club as they heard about the fun meetings. Even the students, who once laughed at Emma's love for reading, became curious and joined in. The library became a lively place every Saturday, filled with laughter, stories, and friendship. One day, Mrs. Brown made an announcement. "Our book club has grown so much," she said. "I think it's time for a special event. How about we have a book club celebration day?" Everyone cheered. They planned a big celebration with games, story readings, and even a small play based on the adventures of Tom. The members were excited. The celebration day arrived, and the library was filled with people members of the book club, their families, friends, and even teachers from school. They watched the play, listened to stories, and joined in the games. It was a joyful day, full of smiles and laughter. Emma looked around and felt proud. The little book club that started with just a few people had grown into a big, happy community. At the end of the day, Mrs. Brown gathered everyone around. "Today, we celebrate not just books, but friendship and learning," she said. "Books have brought us together and helped us see the world in new ways. And this is only the beginning. There are many more books to read and adventures to have." Emma nodded. She knew that the book club would continue to be a place where stories came to life, where people of all ages could share their thoughts, and where friendship and imagination could grow. As she stood there with her friends, she felt grateful. The book club had become a big part of her life, and she knew that every Saturday would bring a new story and a new adventure.